Well, it was obviously very emotionally overwhelming and bittersweet. Obviously, to see him moving, to hear his voice, to know that he's alive, even though we believed he was alive, we were praying this whole time. To have that validation was indescribable. And on the other hand, to see him obviously medically fragile, medically compromised, I'm sure emotionally and psychologically compromised as a parent, was very difficult.
Tell us about the number 207.
Today is 207 days since Hersh was stolen from us and from his life and from himself.
207 days since he was stolen, as you put it. And I know, having spoken to you, that quite a few of those days have been days of hope, for that hope then to be dashed. How do you feel today, on day 207, when there's yet again talk of a possible deal and the release of the hostages?
Well, I think that we are always cautiously optimistic, and we say every day that hope is mandatory. So we don't even choose to be hopeful. It's mandatory. It's a command that we give ourselves. But, as you mentioned, there have been so many ups and downs and close and not far, close and not close moments that we have learned early on. The saying, don't count your chickens before they hatch, and don't count your hostage deals until they're implemented and your hostage is home.
And yet Hersh's fate and the fate of the other hostages could hinge on the political decisions made in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem by this government, whether they go into Rafah or not, whatever happens next in the war. If the Prime Minister Netanyahu was in the room with you right now, what would you say to him directly?
Look, my understanding is actually that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been leaning in and being very courageous and open, which had not always been the case. And so I commend him for doing what it takes, even though it will be painful, even though it will be hard, even though it will be expensive.
But there are two members of the cabinet, the finance minister and the security minister, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who just today said this offensive to Rafah has to go ahead, more or less, whatever happens to the hostages. They're more interested in the military campaign than in the survival of your son.
I think in many ways we and the hostages themselves, but we 133 hostage families are pawns in a game that we never wanted to play. We are part of theater. We're extras in a production that we never asked to be participating in. And yet I think, look, part of being in a democracy is that you're going to have voices that you do not agree with, that you do not feel that you have anything to do with their worldview. And yet their voices and our voices are, allowed to be out there. That's part of being in a democracy.
Yeah. When I first met you, Rachel, just after October the 7th, you showed us some videos of Hersh, and he seemed like an incredibly young, vivacious, funny kind of guy. If you could speak to him directly now, what would you say to him as a mother?
Well, I would say to him what I say to him all day long, first of all, which is, I love you, stay strong, survive. And it's a command. It's not a suggestion. And I would say we are running to the ends of the earth tirelessly. There's not 1 minute of one day in the last 207 days that we haven't worked to save you and to save the other hostages. And we will never stop until you are home.
And just one more, if I may, and we've talked about this as well in the past. There are many, many thousands of Palestinian families grieving for their dead children, or perhaps even missing children under the rubble. What's your message to them?
My heart actually does break when I see those images of the innocent civilians who are in Gaza, who are suffering horribly. It's hundreds of thousands of people who are suffering in this region. And, out of all of those hundreds of thousands of innocent people suffering in Gaza, I really only know one well. And I share his DNA. and he lived in me for 9 months. And I feel for all of those innocent, suffering people in Gaza. And I want the suffering in our region to end. And I want an idea of a future to be built.
Rachel Goldberg-Polin, thank you very much indeed, and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.